Thank you, Madam Speaker. So tonight we're having an emergency debate to discuss proposed 25% tariffs by the President-elect of the United States. So we have to ask ourselves, how did we get here? And the answer to that question is because the Liberals have so badly managed our relationship with the United States over the past 9 years. And I could speak for 2 or 3 hours about that, but I only have 10 minutes, so I'll only be able to address a few of these issues. The first one is softwood lumber. We've had a softwood lumber dispute unresolved by these Liberals for the last 9 years. As a result of this, we have lost tens of thousands of jobs in the forestry sector. Over $9 billion in duties have been collected by the United States. $9 billion that could have been used to invest in new equipment, new machinery, new sawmills, new technology, and new jobs for Canadian workers. Instead, what's happened is sawmills have closed, Canadian workers have lost their jobs, many of them unionized workers. These were good-paying jobs, and they've all gone down to the United States. Now, I understand why the United States is doing that, because they're trying to protect their workers. The question is, why has this Liberal Prime Minister repeatedly failed to protect Canadian workers? And that's just on softwood lumber. Those tariffs total on average, the countervailing and anti-dumping duties total about 15%, and it has wreaked havoc on Canadian workers. Now, the proposed tariff of 25%, you can only imagine what that would do to forestry workers from coast to coast to coast across Canada. So, failure number one, and what they always say, Madam Speaker, the old saying is, you know, the sequel is always worse than the original. So the original failure by this government has been on softwood lumber. And let me tell you, it's a horror movie in of itself. But the sequels actually just keep getting worse. And the effect on Canadian workers. So it's bad enough that Canadians in general suffer the consequences of a Prime Minister who has incompetently managed the relationship with our largest trading partner. And let's remember, that accounts for 40% of our GDP, the trading relationship with the United States. It is the most important trading relationship that we have in Canada. And a Prime Minister really only has a few responsibilities, core responsibilities, one of which keep Canadians safe. We know this Prime Minister has miserably failed on this. Violent crime is surging. People are out on parole 5 minutes after they've committed a crime. That's been an abject failure. The other very important thing is to maintain the trading relationship with the United States. And once again, this Liberal Prime Minister has been an absolute failure and a disaster. So we start with softwood lumber, still not resolved 9 years later, tens of thousands of jobs lost, billions of dollars worth of tariffs collected to the detriment of Canadian workers and Canadian industry. So from there we fast forward to 2018, where the United States under President Trump, then President Trump, imposed 232 tariffs on steel and aluminum. Now, we have to ask ourselves, why did they impose those tariffs? Well, it's actually pretty interesting because it's about the border. So in 2018, it's about the border. In 2024, these proposed tariffs are about the border. History repeats itself when you have an incompetent government. So the 232 tariffs were actually because Chinese steel and aluminum were coming into Canada and being diverted down into the United States, taking away American jobs, taking away American steel production. And the Americans tried to warn us about this repeatedly. And I know this from my consultations with the steel and the aluminum industry. And they were asking for Canada to come up with a way to deal with this anti-circumvention methods of bringing Chinese steel in through Canada and flooding into the United States. And guess what? The incompetent Prime Minister, the incompetent Liberal government, did absolutely nothing despite repeated requests from the United States to clean up the border and stop allowing the steel to come in. So they imposed punishing 232 tariffs on Canadian industries. And guess what? We lost jobs in our steel industry. We lost jobs in our aluminum industry. Now, I know what they'll say, oh, we brought tariffs against them, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole thing could have been avoided, Madam Speaker, if they weren't so incompetently managing the relationship with our largest trading partner. So because of how they behaved, the United States put punishing tariffs on our steel and aluminum industry, which caused all kinds of damage. Again, who are the ones that suffer from the Prime Minister's incompetence? It's not him. He continues to live his lavish lifestyle. But the workers, the unionized workers in particular, are the ones who suffer and lose their jobs when a Prime Minister so incompetently manages the largest trading relationship that we have in our economy. So that's the interesting thing, that the 2018 tariffs were about a border issue. You would think that even a government as incompetent as this Liberal government would realize maybe we should make sure we're taking care of our border with our largest trading partner. It's an irritant, right? But they don't. They just continue to bumble along and mismanage the relationship. So where do we end up? We end up with a situation now where there is the potential of punishing 25% tariffs being levied against all goods coming into the United States. This would have an unbelievably devastating effect on the Canadian economy. And one of the reasons, again, is the issues on the border. And before I spoke tonight, I had the opportunity to watch a news report from a CBS affiliate in the United States. And in that report, they talked about a 295 miles of border between Canada and the United States that encompasses New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire. And the number of arrests that are being made by the U.S. Border Services are skyrocketing. In 7,000 people entered the United States illegally and were arrested in 2023 from just this 295 miles of border. In 2024, according to the report that I watched tonight, that number is up to 19,000. Now, these are 19,000 arrests, not incidents. And according to the report as well, 321 of the people who were arrested out of those 19,000 were on a terror watch list. So they mismanaged the border with respect to steel and aluminum, allowing Chinese products to come in, resulting in punishing 232 tariffs being slapped on Canadian steel and aluminum, which resulted in economic devastation in those industries. There were jobs lost. Hard-working union members. I visited these members at steel plants across the country. They work hard. They lost their job because of government incompetence. And now they face the same reality because of how incompetently this Liberal government has mismanaged the relationship with our largest trading partner. So when we try and think about the effects of this, again, we have to think about the workers that are going to be affected. 93% of our auto manufacturing goes to the United States. 84% of our steel goes to the United States. When you look at unionized workers in the auto sector, the mining sector, forestry, oil and gas, 412,000 union jobs are at risk. I don't know what their approach is, Madam Speaker, other than incompetence, but we need a new approach. We need a Canada-first approach. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And that's just it. You know, no government in the history of Canada has actually signed off on more trade agreements than this government. And that's just a fact, Madam Speaker. Now we're having to do a second Trump trade agreement. And when the Conservatives had a chance to contribute towards debate, the most recent one was between Canada and Ukraine. They voted against it. Every other political party voted in favor of it. Just the Conservatives voted against it. And when it came to the last United States trade agreement, they capitulated and wanted to give everything away. Why should Canadians trust this leader of the Conservative Party today when he's so easy to throw away what are important opportunities for Canadians? He is not putting Canada first, I would suggest.
Member for Dufferin-Caledon.
We voted against the Ukraine Free Trade Agreement because they tried to impose a carbon tax in a trade agreement for the first time ever. I read every trade agreement we have. Carbon pricing, carbon leakage isn't in a single one of them. They're trying to put a carbon tax in a trade agreement with a country at war. I think it was a terrible thing to do. That's why I voted against it. But on the renegotiation, I've read the book by the United States lead negotiator. The members should read it. And in it, he states this with respect to their great negotiating tactics. On August 27th, we finally had an arrangement with only a few hours to spare. Of course, at this stage, an important part of the cast was absent, the entire Canadian delegation. This is because of the deep freeze in U.S.-Canada relationships that went from June until August 22nd, when we signed a new United States-Mexico trade agreement. Canada wasn't at the table for 3 months of those negotiations because of the absolute and utter incompetence of this Liberal Prime Minister and government. The Americans said, here's the trade agreement, sign it or don't. If that's negotiating well, they need to go back to school.
Questions and comments? The member Sandwich Gulf Islands.
Thank you. The honourable member for Dufferin-Caledon. I've been waiting a long time to ask this because I was really disturbed by this speech from his leader, the leader of the official opposition, who decided to, in the same way that the Conservatives said the Canada-Ukraine trade agreement was woke, decided to attack the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy, Vice Admiral Angus Topshee, who has served this country for almost as long as his leader of the official opposition has been alive, who's worked, who served in Afghanistan, who's commanded naval destroyers. Vice Admiral Angus Topshee deserves an apology from the Conservative Party, and I wonder if the honourable member will be honourable enough to do that on the floor tonight.
The honourable member for Dufferin-Caledon.
I don't even know what to make of that. It's not a question that's relevant to any of the debate tonight with respect to an emergency debate on proposed tariffs by President-elect Trump. The contribution to the Green Party in this debate is to talk about a comment about the wokeification of the military, which is actually a legitimate problem. It's one of the reasons why we are having such a difficult time actually attracting soldiers. This Liberal government has really destroyed proud military institutions in this country, and I'm disappointed that this is the member's contribution to the serious threat for workers' jobs in this country as a result of the mismanagement of the trade relationship. I would think that would be her question, other than to try to attack the next Prime Minister of this country.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm wondering if the member can provide his thoughts in regards to why it is that the leader of the Conservative Party was part of a cabinet with Stephen Harper that made serious, severe cuts to Canada border control, Madam Speaker. You're talking well over 1,000 jobs, millions of dollars, and then they wonder why it is that some of the problems occurred after that butchering of the department from the Conservative Party.
Answer from the honourable for Dufferin-Caledon.
If only he knew someone in the government, if these alleged cuts took place, which of course they didn't, it cut bureaucracy, not frontline BSOs, but if only he knew someone in the government to fix if this problem existed. They've been the government for 9 years. They haven't figured out that there's a problem with the border. It's the epitome of why we are where we are, because this government is incompetent from top to bottom.